Good afternoon. My name's Thomas Tucker, and this is going to be a tutorial uh, walking you through installing not only the Gns3 server, but the Gns3 GUI, as well as importing Cisco and Nokia appliances into Gns3. And I felt like it was necessary to go ahead and get this out of the way because I get so many messages about exactly how to start building a lab, like how to get the devices into GNS3, how to get GNS3 started so you can start doing these tutorials. So this is it's going to be real quick, real basic, less than 40 minutes. So the only thing that's required, or my setup, is I have the GNS3 client, which is going to be running on a laptop that's called Debian, and it's going to connect to the GNS3 server that's going to be running on a Sunfire X4150. So we're going to deploy it in a client server architecture. Uh, the GNS3 server is not going to run locally. My laptop only has like 16 gigs of RAM, whereas my server has 64. So it's much more equipped. So this is just vanilla Debian 11. Uh, I think Bookworm's the name of it. Standard KDE Plasma Desktop. So the first thing we'll do is we'll actually just open Firefox and we'll literally Google GNS3 Linux install. And I found that the instructions on the GNS3 website are more than adequate. We're just going to skip through a few sections here. Now, we're not using Ubuntu, so we're going to go ahead and scroll past that. And we're going to follow the Debian Buster instructions. Again, I've got Bookworm installed on my server and my laptop, but these instructions work just the same. So we're going to go ahead and start our console. Um, and we're going to open another tab here so that we have one tab for our server and one tab for our local machine that we're going to call GUI. Just for the sake of separation, we're going to make our server tab a shade of blue and our local GUI tab a shade of green. So now we're going to SSH to the server. Uh, the server's IP address ends in .2. The local IP address of this laptop is .3, just for the sake of knowing. So I usually do a very slim Debian install. So the first app I'm actually going to install is going to be the sudo application. Not out of necessity, but the instructions on the GNS3 website all use sudo. So it makes copying and pasting just a little bit easier. So once we've got sudo installed, we're going to go ahead and copy our first set of instructions. And we paste it directly into the console here. And when this dialog shows up, should non-super users be able to capture packets? I always just pick yes. More or less out of laziness. I don't want to have to troubleshoot uh, Wireshark permissions on a per user basis. Now that we've got most of our dependencies out the way, we're going to go ahead and install the Gns3 Server application. So pip3 install Gns3 Server. And we're going to skip past all of these Docker related instructions. If you'd like to install Docker, you're more than welcome to do so, but our main focus is getting the Gns3 server up and running. So our next step is to edit our aptitude sources file, which we're going to do. And we're just adding those Ubuntu sources. And then our GPG key. And we're going to copy our next stanza, which is just updating our aptitude sources, installing Dynamips, and installing ubridge. Should non-super users be able to run Gns3? I just always pick yes. All right, so next we'll go ahead and remove those repos and just, clean up our sources file. Completely optional though. All right, so once we've got those two repos removed, we're going to go ahead and remove our GPG key. And the last step in installing our server is to add our user to several groups. This is going to be KVM, libvirt, ubridge, and Wireshark. Our particular user is going to be Thomas. All right. So with those four groups, that pretty much concludes our server install. So what we'll do next is we're going to go ahead and reboot our server, but we're going to use kexec reboot to do so. And the reason is it allows your server to reboot a lot faster. And the way it does that is instead of having to reinitialize all the hardware, it boots a second kernel from the kernel you're currently in and then closes that current kernel. So it pretty much just boots into a new kernel, so to speak. And of course, our SSH connection is closed, but we're going to run a ping to it uh, just so you can see how quickly it does recover. So typically it's less than maybe a minute or two, which for a server is, I'd have to say, very, very good. I don't know about other servers, but this X4150, it goes through, it takes probably close to 10 minutes to fully boot. First it boots the ILOM, you know, then once it boots the ILOM, it actually boots the hard disks, then the RAID controller, then all the memory, etc. Then the kernel, and finally, becomes reachable. So kexec reboot cuts that time down substantially. And just like that, we can see our server's back. So less than 2 minutes. And now we'll just issue the command Gns3 Server with the Daemon option. And what this allows you to do is it allows Gns3 Server to run as a daemon. So instead of running it from our user, if our user were to log out, our Gns3 Server process would continue to run in the background. So now we're going to switch to our GUI tab. And close that extra instance of Firefox. And we're going to do the exact same thing, except this time we're going to be installing Gns3 GUI as opposed to Gns3 Server. So again, hop into root. I'm not sure if I have sudo installed already. And as it turns out, it is already installed on my laptop. So a little bit of house cleaning. All right, so we'll just go ahead and paste our initial stanza, which is going to install all of our dependencies. All right, now that those are out the way, again, we're just going to install the GNS3 GUI on our local machine here. All right, and once again, skip over the parts pertaining to Docker. We're going to go ahead and edit our aptitude sources file. And get our GPG key, then update aptitude, install Dynamips and ubridge. All right, now we remove those Ubuntu sources. And we're going to delete our GPG key. And then just like when we installed the server software, we're going to add our user to several groups. Our user is Thomas, so we're going to add Thomas to the group KVM, the group libvirt, the group ubridge, as well as the group Wireshark. Right. And that is all there is to it. Let's see if we can start the GUI from the CLI. No, okay, well, we'll just do it the old-fashioned way. I'm going to search for GNS3, and here it is. All right, so we'll skip back over to the server tab just so you can see how the client communicates with the server. So once we have GNS3 up for the first time, we're going to run the appliance on a remote server. So we're not running the server locally. The server is already running on a remote machine, and we're going to connect our local client to that remote machine. So this is my server's IP address, 192.168.40.2, and I'm going to remove authentication, just less overhead. And you can see the server has already started communicating with the client. And if you look under the server summaries tab, we can see our server has appeared. The host name X4150. No CPU thus far, and 1.3% of our RAM is being taken up. So go ahead and get rid of that console window. And I'm not sure how to get rid of these messages in the top right, but we're going to just restart the client because I don't feel like looking at that. All right, so new project. Just going to keep it at untitled. And so we're going to shrink this. So just so you could see the output from the server itself. And we're going to go to File and Import Appliance. And this GNS3 appliance file, I'll include a link to it, but it makes importing this particular image for the 7750 really easy. So you literally just select the import file, select your QEMU binary, and you can see it knows it's ready to install. So once we click install, it's going to start uploading the image from this laptop's hard disk to our server, which we can actually see in the output, writing image file to home Thomas GNS3, etc. All right, so that appliance has been successfully installed. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to finish installing our virtual routers, which includes a 3745 switch and a 7200 router. So we go to Preferences, under Dynamips iOS routers. I'm going to browse, and then we're just going to select the image that we want to add. So in this case, it's going to be our 3745. And again, that's going to upload from the hard disk on my laptop to the hard disk on the server. All right, name. I'm just going to call it Cisco 3745. And we'll go ahead and click this is an Ethernet switch router, Ether switch router. And now we're going to go ahead and calculate our idle PC value. And I'm not 100% sure if this is still necessary or not, but I remember once upon a time, close to maybe a decade ago, where if you didn't calculate your idle PC value, then your Dynamips image was going to peg your CPU at 100 no matter what. So, given we've had close to a decade of evolution in processing power, this might not be necessary, but just for the sake of habit, I calculate it for all my Dynamips images. All right. So we've got our switch. Now we're going to add our router. It's going to be a new image, and we're going to browse to our 7200 image. And again, it's going to upload it to the server. All right, and we'll call this Cisco 7200. And what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and give it 2 gig ports. And calculate the idle PC again. All right, now that's done. We can go ahead and click finish. And now we've got our Dynamips iOS routers, as well as our Nokia SR imported into GNS3. So now what I usually do is I go through my devices and any little configuration changes to the templates that I want to make. I'll go ahead and make them now. For example, uh, the default name for this, I just want SW to denote switch. And with the 7200, I like these to start with R, so it's already configured that way. But when it comes to these Nokia routers in particular, just shave off some of the template name. And I like these to start with a letter N, just so I know that the Nokias. And we'll pick a symbol for it. And I typically give it that beefy LSR icon. All right. And since I know I've got 2 quad cores in my server, I just put the number of virtual CPUs to 8. And with that, we will go ahead and build a network. Nothing fancy. But before we do that, we're going to set up our console application. So preferences and console applications. Click edit, and we're going to select KDE console since that's what we're using. And we're going to reduce the delay between each console launch to 50 milliseconds. And since these console connections are going to use Telnet, you know, you're pretty much going to Telnet to a specific port somewhere in the 5000s. Oh, but before we do that, yeah, we're going to go to console, to our settings preferences, and we're going to make sure that we select run all console windows in a single process. All right, once that's taken care of, um, let's go ahead and install Telnet on our local machine because these console connections are going to use a particular Telnet port, or they're going to use Telnet in a port somewhere in the 5000. So in order to have console access, to these virtual devices, we'll have to have Telnet installed on our local PC. And so we'll drag and drop one of our 7750s and drag and drop a 7200 and drag and drop a 3745. So 2 routers and a layer 3 switch. And 111 on our 7750 is going to go to 00 on our 7200, and 10 on our 7200 is going to go to 10 on our 3745. We're going to start all devices and console to all devices. And as you can see, it opened up each device in its own tab in console here. All right, and our 7750 is now fully booted. We'll go ahead and just log in with admin, show our version 13.04, 13.0R4. Show our card state. We've got one switch fabric module. We're going to go ahead and configure our first card. It's going to be a IOM3 XPB. And after we've got our card configured, we're going to configure our MDA in slot 1. And it's going to be that M5 media dependent adapter. Right, get back to root. We could show card state. And you see we've got our card in 1 and our MDA in slot 1. Let's go ahead and do a show port. And we see we've got all 5 of our ports. And we'll just give this one a name. It's going to be N1. We'll head into our physical port 111, give it a description. And also issue the command no shutdown. All right. Now that we've got our physical port configured, let's attach it to a logical router interface. This interface is going to be called 2R1. And we're going to give it a description. Then bind our physical port to it. and give it the address 10.0.0.0 with a /31 subnet mask. And let's try to ping the far end just for proof of concept. And just as expected, those requests time out. So now we'll head over into router R1, which is our Cisco 7200. And we're going to show our ARP table. Going to interface Gig00, which is connected to our 7750. And we're going to give it a description. And also put it in an operup state. And we're going to assign it the other side of our /31, which is 10.0.0.1. I'm going to look at our ARP table. And we've got a local ARP for our port 00. And back to our 7750, we ping the far end, and of course, as expected, they work. So let's take another look at our ARP table, and we see our 7750 has a ARP entry ending in 0001. So we've established basic IP connectivity across this link. So next we'll work on our link to our switch, which is going to be Gig10, and we're going to give it a description. Something basic, easy to understand. And put it in an operup state by issuing no shutdown. And we're going to configure the sub interface Gig10.99. And this is what's going to encapsulate and de-encapsulate our VLAN traffic to and from our switch. And just random VLAN 99. So we're going to configure .q tagging on it, and our IP address 172.16.0.0/31. And looking at our ARP table, we've got an entry for our local interface. And if we try to ping our far end, which is going to be the switch, VLAN 99, of course, these pings time out. So over to the switch. And head into configure terminal. Make sure that we put VLAN 99 in an active state. And we'll configure our interface VLAN 99. Give it a description. As well as an IP address, which is going to be the other side of our /31, 172.16.0.1/31. Now we're going to configure our trunk port. Interface F10, switch port mode trunk. If I can remember how to configure encapsulation, there we go. And we're going to allow VLAN 99 along with the default VLAN. So. All right, so now VLAN 99 should be running through our trunk, and we do see 1 and 99 are active in our management domain and in a forwarding state. So let's try to ping the switch from our router. And as we can see, we do have IP connectivity from our 7200 to our 3745 via VLAN 99. And we'll go ahead and save our configs right on the Cisco's and admin save on the 7750. And that concludes it. Let's not open a new instance, but yeah, that's our entire tutorial. So we've built this basic network in GNS3. We've established layer 3 connectivity, and uh, we've installed the Gns3 server on a remote server, the Gns3 GUI on a local machine. We've imported several devices into GNS3, all in under 40 minutes, which isn't too bad. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to email me uh, or leave a comment. I'll try to get back to you. All right, have a good one.